All right, welcome everybody. This is week 3 of our podcast listening club. We are listening to the CAP Radio After the Assault podcast. This week, the episodes that we listened to were episode 4, entitled Case Closed, and episode 5, Living with the Trauma. So we have a wonderful group of panelists here, and we'll start by doing quick introductions, and then we'll get to the discussion. Laura, can you please introduce yourself first?
Hi, thank you, Selena. Thank you for having me. My name is Laura Valdes. I am the Yolo County District Attorney's Office Victim Services Program Manager. I have been here as a victim advocate for the last 21 years.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. All right, Sarah Meredith.
Thanks, Selena. My name is Sarah Meredith. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I get to serve as the director of the UC Davis Center for Advocacy, Resources, and Education. I've been at UC Davis for about 12 years and in the overall field of sexual assault and domestic violence for about 18 years.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jess.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess. I am the sexual assault advocate with Empower Yolo.
And Jen.
Good afternoon. So I am the anti-human trafficking advocate with Empower Yolo.
All right, and David Robbins, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're just introducing ourselves.
All right, David Robbins, Yolo County District Attorney's Office. I'm with the sex crimes team.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. Amy, sorry, Amy.
That's all right. I'm Amy Groven. I am the Director of Clinical Programs for Empower Yolo.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so in episodes 3 and 4, we heard about challenges in prosecuting sexual assault cases, as well as the difficulty in healing from sexual trauma. The podcast shares that about 1 in 5 women are victims of a completed rape. They also share that about 1 in 2 transgender women are victims of sexual assault as well. Many of the survivors in the podcast discuss challenges in having a central location of where to find information on how to report a rape or a crime if it occurs. As we discussed last week, some survivors will contact law enforcement directly. Some will contact the local rape crisis center, which is what Empower Yolo is, and the UC Davis Care Program is an advocacy group on campus. And some will present to the hospital. So if you'd like more information on what those agencies are doing in Yolo County to support survivors, we do encourage you to listen to last week's listening club. So Laura, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us what the role of victim services is, at the DA's office, and how you support sexual assault survivors?
Of course. Thank you, Selena. So the victim advocates at the Yolo County District Attorney's Office are considered government advocates. What that means is that we have no confidentiality. We work with cases that are going through the criminal justice system. And usually we're made aware of these cases once a police report has been filed and the police report has reached the district attorney's office for charging. The victim advocates then receive the police report once a referral is made and the case has been reviewed by one of our attorneys. They refer the case to the victim advocates, and we reach out to victims. We do reach out to victims of misdemeanors, of felonies, as well as cases that are not going to be charged. So we make contact with all victims and make sure that they understand what resources and what services are available in the county for them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. David, can you tell us a little bit about the sex crimes team and how that started? And then just tell us a little bit about what your team does and how you're able to charge a case.
Yeah, so we started back in January of 2020, right before COVID hit. And the idea behind the team was we were getting overwhelmed with sex assault cases, sadly. And what we were finding was that a lot of them were kind of getting lost in our charging module. And there was a bunch of delays and it was really unfair to victims. So the idea was that we were going to have this dedicated team to really focus on those cases alone so we can make sure that we get, quicker decisions for victims. And it really has been really beneficial. We've been able to streamline a lot more of the process. And it's also allowed us to meet as a group. When we started, there was, at its peak, we were 4. We're kind of short-staffed at the moment, but we would all sit down, we would roundtable cases to get different perspectives. And it was very, very helpful to deciding, especially on kind of borderline cases, whether, we thought we couldn't meet our standard. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of the question there.
That's the question. Can you just talk about the charging standards? The podcast talks about law enforcement and their standards as far as being able to establish probable cause and make an arrest, but the DA's office, I understand, has different charging standards as far as moving cases forward.
Yeah, that's correct. So police officers have a much lower standard, like you said, the probable cause. We are aiming for, can we prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt? Not all doubt, but we want to, make sure that it's a reasonable doubt, certainly, which is a very high standard. It's not a set standard. It's not 50%. It's not 100%. It's really amorphous. So it's really hard for the community or jury members to, reach the decision when we have such a kind of abstract standard. So what we want to make sure is that when the police agencies are sending us the cases, that they're not just meaning that they have probable cause. We want to see beyond a reasonable doubt when a case is forwarded to us. So that sometimes means, hey, we're going to delay charging decision because we want the police to go back and they get more evidence so we can make a final decision on the case.
Wonderful. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about how your office, how they follow up with survivors, maybe when a case has been submitted, and kind of how you initially engage with survivors?
Of course. So like I mentioned earlier, once a case is reviewed and a charging decision has been made as to whether it's going to be charged or not going to be charged, it's then referred to the Victim Services Program. We will contact victims, whether a case is charged or not. We will contact them. We try to contact them by phone. If we're unable to contact them by phone, we do send out a packet of information and a letter introducing ourselves to the person named as a victim on a police report and giving them our information so that they would be able to contact us. In the packet, we also send out resources and other agencies in the county that they can seek assistance with. More than anything, because we don't know where the victim is at, what emotional or mental state they're at. We want to be able to provide them with different resources, different contacts that they can reach out to and be comfortable with. But at the same time, we also want to give them our information so that they can contact us. On cases where the DA has reviewed, the DA's office has reviewed the case and the charging attorney has decided that they are not going to be filing charges at the time, we reach out to those victims, and I'm the one that usually reaches out to them, making a phone call. And I tell them that the case won't be charged and give them the option of coming in and talking to the attorney that made that decision. So we want to make sure that they completely understand what is happening, as well as to understand what the options that they have are.
Wonderful, thank you. Sarah, can you tell us how the CARE program works with survivors?
Yeah, I am so glad that Laura is here as well. One of the things, as I was thinking about this episode of the podcast, is how grateful I am that we have such a great working relationship with our victim services advocates over at the DA's office. So in terms of just how CARE at UC Davis works with survivors in particular, We provide services to any students or employees of UC Davis who have experienced sexual assault, intimate partner violence, stalking, sometimes other forms of trauma or assault or abuse that don't necessarily rise to a criminal level, but might be adjudicated through a policy as a policy violation on campus. So we provide support, advocacy, accompaniment, and we are a confidential resource. So as Laura was talking about, the advocates in victim services aren't able to promise that level of confidentiality. Advocates within the UC Davis Care Program, as well as the advocates within Empower Yolo, can offer confidentiality. And so we're often a starting place for folks who are trying to decide how they want to move forward, if they want to report. Sometimes we're getting connected with folks after they've made a report, and we become a resource for them to help understand where they're at in the process, as I'm thinking about how we collaborate and coordinate with the DA's office and victim services. We'll often communicate with the victim services advocate who's assigned to the case, as long as we have a release from our client. So meaning that the survivor has given us permission to coordinate on their behalf. We may gather information about where their case is at, if it's still under review, if it's going to court, help victim services relay some of that information back. And then as long as we have permission, we might also be able to share information about if it's a student, if they're about to head into midterms or finals, if they're an employee, maybe things that are going on that are stressors, where the communication needs to be extra sensitive, or time sensitive, right? So if there's a way that we can coordinate communications that aren't happening right as they're heading into finals, that is sometimes helpful in terms of a trauma-informed response. Other services that the UC Davis Care Program might be able to offer to survivors specifically is that we do the crisis intervention and counseling services, emergency response. So if there's a survivor of sexual assault who would like to access an evidentiary exam, we'll go with them, much like the advocates at Empower Yolo. We'll help get them connected to other on and off campus resources, and then support them through their healing process. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but those are a few things that we'll do both on our own and in collaboration with other units, in particular with victim services.
Wonderful, thank you. David, one of the speakers in the podcast talks about the challenge when a DA's office receives what they call a thin case file. And I think what they're alluding to is maybe a case that doesn't have a lot of evidence. And you talked about you may have to reject a case for further follow-up. So you're asking law enforcement to go back and do more investigation. Can you just tell us a little bit about what kind of evidence could be helpful in deciding to charge a case or not?
Yeah, I guess that really depends on the nature of the sex charge that's being alleged. DNA obviously is a big one, and they're doing amazing things with DNA right now. And we've made some really significant finds on cases based on, pieces of old clothing, toothbrushes, things like that. So the one thing we always like to remind victims, whether it's pre-charging or post-charging, is, share every detail with us, because any little detail could be really significant. When we reject cases for follow-up, obviously DNA, if the case is somewhat fresh, can be really helpful, or if there's still clothing from the alleged assault. We also like to go through social media, because social media usually contains a lot of, in addition to public stuff, a lot of private stuff. People's internet search history has been very, very helpful for us. And it's a bit scary, but the cell phone really, it tracks everything you do. GPS has been very significant on a few recent cases we've had in solving some cold case sex assaults we had from both our county and other counties. So when we're really rejecting for follow-up, we want just some independent corroboration. And that also means speaking to a lot of people. That doesn't necessarily mean we need a direct witness, but if there's a neighbor who saw, the victim crying the next day and disclosed, that can be really powerful evidence. If there's a teacher that they spoke to and disclosed to, that can be really powerful evidence. Or if it's just, the mom noticed that their son or daughter was acting weird after, Christmas time, if that's when the assault happened, that can be really powerful evidence. It's also really helpful for the DAs to personally watch the interviews of the victim, and everything is recorded now, as far as the interviews go. And that's really helpful because we're not present when police interview the victims or when MDI interviews the victims. So it allows us to really get a good sense as to, our objective opinion as to credibility and whether or not a jury's gonna, think, hey, this is really hinky. But the outside stuff like cell phones, DNA, and other witnesses is really what we're focused on as far as the follow-up goes.
So it's probably safe to say, based on some of that additional evidence, that these cases can take quite some time to investigate, whether you're getting information back from cell phones or trying to find other witnesses. So it sounds like, the cases may take some time as they're being worked. And we've have two advocacy groups, and we also have Empower Yolo. Jess, can you talk about how Empower Yolo partners with other advocacy groups and how we work to support survivors through the investigation and prosecution of a case?
Yeah, so how we support survivors, we provide accompaniment, whether that's to court, whether it's a minor at the MDIC, and we also can follow up with victim services to figure out the status on their case. As far as working with other advocacy groups, obviously victim services, we work with them. We also work with the MDIC, and we do work really closely with law enforcement to get basically everything for the survivor, so that they can feel confident and confident that their case is moving forward. So yeah.
And the MDIC is the Multidisciplinary Interview Center. We had Cecilia on, she's the program manager of the center, and she was on last week. So she explained a little bit about the forensic interviews that happen with children in our county. So sounds like, David, your team really tries to be on a case for, as early as possible. And it sounds like you do continue, you review the interviews, you charge, and then your team keeps the case and carries it through.
Yeah, so we really like to be involved as early as possible. And oftentimes we're informed of the case before the handcuffs even go on a suspect, even if it's like an ongoing thing, meaning it just happened and they're at the house or the apartment getting ready to make the arrest. We're ideally involved as early as that possible. The nice thing about this particular team is that we engage in what's called vertical prosecution, meaning when I get the call from the detective or the police officer, I'm immediately working with them to make sure that we're streamlining that follow-up, so we are not having to ask detectives to do more follow-up and delay the case. And then I'll work with them on the follow-up right then and there. I'll then continue in my charging review. I'll charge the case, and then ideally, I will keep that case and handle it all the way through jury trial.
Wonderful. Is that unique to these types of cases?
No, not necessarily. It varies from office to office. There's horizontal, meaning some DAs just do the probable cause hearings, and then some do the jury trials, some do the miscellaneous dates. But as it goes to cases like sexual assault, homicide and domestic violence, I think most offices generally tend to do this vertical prosecution just for the benefit of the victims or, their family members.
That makes sense. Sure, it's very difficult to hear be able to have to talk about your situation. And so probably having the same prosecutor there who understands what you've gone through would be very beneficial to a family or a survivor. So Laura, one of the things the podcast, highlights for us is how these are difficult cases to prove and to prosecute. And how are community members able to find out more information about the number of cases that are submitted to the district attorney's office and the number of cases that are charged and the outcomes of those cases?
A few years ago, I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, the district attorney's office, through a committee that they have called the Multicultural Community Council, decided that, in order to be able to provide transparency to the community, so that the community knows what's happening in the DA's office and how cases are being taken care of here in the office, came up with a transparency portal. What happened was they were able to contact a company that is in Rochester, New York, and a third-party company came into the office and interviewed the community council, the Multicultural Community Council, and said, as a community, what do you guys want to see in this portal? With the help of the Multicultural Community Council, they were able to put together a transparency portal for it's not even for the DA's office, because the DA's office has no hand in the information that is put into that portal. This third party is given statistics and given information on cases and how they've resolved on a regular basis. And this third party company are the ones that will upload this information and put it into the Commons Transparency dashboard. This is available for everybody and anybody to use. It could be used to gather information of how certain cases have been dealt with. It can be selective of what type of crime type you want to see. So if you wanted to see how sexual assault cases are being handled or how domestic violence cases are being handled, you can request that information be given to you. The other ability that this dashboard has is you're able to go in there and immediately copy or send that information to people. So if somebody's not in agreement with the way something's being done, it could immediately be sent over to a senator, or it could be sent over to a county board member or something of the fact saying, I want this information to be reviewed. Like I said, the DA's office, this is not something that the DA's office handles. It's something that's handled by this company over in Rochester, New York. They're the ones that are gathering this information and putting it all up on the transparency portal.
I'll just quickly share what that website looks like. It's measuresforjustice.org/commons/YOLO-DA. So here is where you can explore data to find out information that you are interested in. So you can see the number of cases referred to a prosecutor, the decision after a case is reviewed, cases that may be diverted, and there's many filtering options so that you can select information based on law enforcement agency, based on demographics of the offenders, based on location and residency of the offenders as well. Many different ways of searching the data.
And
so,
I think it's very important to point out that Yolo County is the very first county in the nation that worked with a third-party agency called Measures for Justice to be able to do this. There are many transparency portals that exist in different law enforcement, in different victim service, in different district attorneys' offices. But those are all handled and kept by that district attorney's office. We have no hand in the keeping of this one. It's Measures for Justice that keeps this portal for us.
Thank you, Laura. I encourage anybody interested to look through the data and and find information. And you can share the data sets that you find. You can easily upload it or share it with anybody that might want to learn more about that. Okay, so I'm going to move us forward a little bit in talking about episode 5, Living with Trauma. And this episode talks about the challenges of healing and survivors' need and the needs of survivors in their healing process. Survivors spoke of a loss of safety, a need to grieve their sense of security, and how, what worked for one person didn't always work for them. So Amy, can you start by telling us a little bit about the services that the Empower Yolo Therapy Department provides?
Yeah, so we provide services for adults, children, and teenagers that have experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. And we have some groups and individual counseling available to those populations. So one group that we have is called our Thriving Teens group. And the idea is that we go from being survivors to thrivers. And that's for people ages 12 to 17 years old. It's not divided by gender or anything like that. Anybody within those age ranges can join us if they've experienced a sexual assault. And it's a 12-week course. And some of the topics within that course are things like understanding coping skills, understanding the biology of trauma. It's really important that survivors understand that because a lot of them think that they're going crazy and they're not. Their body is having a reaction to trauma. We also talk about understanding triggers, telling your story, how to have boundaries after a sexual assault, and healthy relationships and things like that. We also have an adult sexual assault group called Foundations. The idea behind this is about rebuilding the foundation to your life to be able to have a successful life after a sexual assault. So this is for anybody who's an adult that has experienced sexual assault in their lifetime. It doesn't have to be recent to join our group. This is also a 12-week group, and it is very similar to our teens group in the sense of some of the topics. We talk about, again, coping skills, telling your story, how to connect with others after a sexual assault, understanding your triggers. We talk about sexual abuse and culture. That's a big topic within that group, things like that. And then we have a 6-week course group called our self-care group. And this is for people 18 and over that have experienced any type of violence, like I had described before, domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, those kinds of things. And the idea behind this group is to teach people that self-care does not have to be bubble baths and vacations. It can be the everyday way that we care for ourselves. And I really appreciated the way that the podcast talked about how that is so difficult for survivors after experiencing trauma like a sexual assault. So we talk about different types of self-care in that group. We give ideas for how to give self-care to yourself in different settings, like at work or at home, within different situations and things like that. And the last group that we have is our DV support group, because we do know that sexual assault also happens within domestic violence groups or within domestic violence couples. And this is, again, for those who are 18 and over. And topics include things like cycle of violence, effects of domestic violence on children, understanding and establishing healthy boundaries, how to have healthy relationships, etc. And all of our groups are a combination of psychoeducation, so there's an educational piece, and also support groups. So getting support from other peers that have gone through something similar. And then we also have our individual services. And again, this is free services. They're short-term services, therapy services for children and adults, as well as teenagers. And all of our therapists are trained in different modalities that help treat trauma. So some of our therapists are trained in EMDR, Some really like to use dialectical behavioral therapy, narrative therapy, trauma-focused CBT, and then they all learn different somatic practices. So those are ways of calming the body through the body. So different tapping, different exercises that clients can do that can help calm the body during fight, flight, and freeze. And then we also receive special training to work with human trafficking victims as well. So the team is very well educated in trauma and different ways to tackle trauma, because not every therapy is going to be the one that matches the client. So we have a lot of things to choose from that are really successful for our clients.
If somebody's interested in signing up for a therapy or support groups, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can either contact me directly. They can email me at amy@empoweryolo.org or call my direct line, which is 530-665-5311. Or they can come into any of our offices and talk to a client navigator. They're also able to give forms and talk about the process of signing up for therapy or a group. And then that information gets delivered to me, and I reach out to clients to sign them up for groups or let them know that, there might be a small wait. We do try to get really recent clients in as fast as possible, and very, very traumatized clients, we try to get them in as fast as possible as well. So those are ways that you can sign up for therapy or groups at Empower Yolo, either contacting me directly or coming into our office to talk to a client navigator.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about what the campus is doing to support survivors and what options they have?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that really stood out to me in this particular episode, and I'll talk about some of the campus services built around supporting this, but a lot of the survivors in this particular episode talked about the frustration they felt because they would try all of these different things to make themselves feel better, and then still feeling really frustrated that these triggers would pop up years later. And I think one of the things that both the care advocates on campus, as well as counseling services, and I know advocates at Empower Yolo and counseling services at Empower Yolo are really tasked with, is helping survivors to understand that healing is not a linear process, that it's often a long process. And there's often a lot of pressure from friends and family members, employers, society as a whole for survivors to just get over it, or for them to be over it already. And I really appreciate Amy's comments about a variety of different options for healing. And I think that's something that on the UC Davis campus we're really focused on as well, is trying to create a variety of options for healing paths for survivors that feel accessible to them. So through the care office, the UC Davis Center for Advocacy, Resources, and Education, the advocates there don't provide clinical counseling, but we do provide one-on-one support for folks. So again, helping them understand that the trauma response that's coming up for them is really often rooted as a survival strategy that is continuing to sort of be activated even when the threat isn't there anymore, that the trauma response is a normal response to a really abnormal event, and then helping them access some coping strategies that may help mitigate some of the triggers and the trauma response that comes up as they move through their healing journey. So we'll do that work with folks one-on-one. We'll also make sure that folks are able to access both on and off campus resources for their continued healing. So I know that we refer folks to Empower Yolo's counseling services. We also have counseling services on the campus, so both for students and for employees. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the different groups that our counseling services offers. But one thing I'll share really quickly about a program that the UC Davis Care Program offers is our 8-week Trauma is Healing program. So that is a closed 8-week program for students, undergrad and graduate school students, who've experienced any form of sexual violence or sexual trauma. The program itself is a combination of community building activities. We discuss different topics each week. So we might discuss safety, 1 week, self-care and mindfulness, another week, boundaries, another week, assertiveness, another week, and so on. So there's themes each week. And then it's also coupled with a gentle yoga practice that's taught through a trauma-informed lens. And the goal of that is to help survivors strengthen and create support for their nervous system. So similar to some of the techniques that Amy was talking about, really addressing how trauma lives in the body and helping survivors access that healing. Other groups that happen on campus specifically for students, both graduate school students and undergraduate school students through counseling services. So we do have a Phoenix Rising group there's separate groups for graduate school students and undergraduate school students. And that is our sexual assault survivor support group, which is facilitated by a specialized counselor in counseling services. We also have a group that's called, I'm gonna mess this up, Liberation, sorry. I look at my notes really fast. Liberation, which is a support group specifically for survivors of intimate partner violence. And similar to what Amy said, there's a big overlap. There's a lot of correlation between sexual assault and intimate partner violence. We notice a lot of survivors of intimate partner violence are also experiencing sexual violence in those abusive relationships. So making sure that there's care and attention provided there. We also have a group on campus that's facilitated by the counselor who is embedded in our Women's Resources and Research Center, as well as our LGBTQIA+ Resource Center. Her name's Maya Wang, and she facilitates a group called Right to Thrive. And that's another healing space for students at UC Davis. For employees, there aren't any specific groups that are run through our academic and staff assistance program, but ASAP does provide short-term counseling services and will help folks get connected with long-term counseling off campus. So those are a few things that the UC Davis campus is doing. And then, like I said, just a lot of collaboration with other folks on and off campus to make sure that there's wraparound services for survivors.
I think one of the things the episode did a great job was explaining how survivors need different options for healing. And what works for one person may not work for the next. And it sounds like the campus is doing a good job trying to provide different options for survivors to assist with their healing. All right, so Jess, can you talk about the Empower Yoga program that we will be starting?
Yes, I am super excited about it. So it's called Empower Yoga, and it will be kind of like what Sarah said with their yoga stuff. It will be an 8-week closed group for adult survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, or human trafficking. And it's basically time, date, everything is to be determined. So stay tuned for that. But it's basically going to cover every 2 weeks is going to be different. So it's going to cover what does it mean to be safe in our bodies, all the way to mind-body connection. Because a lot of times with trauma, we have our feelings over here, but we're not really connecting them with our bodies, and it can be really scary. So this yoga program is really going to facilitate that safe space to do that. And then to also allow survivors to heal however they need to heal. Some survivors might not feel like actually doing the yoga practice, and they just kind of want to lay there and listen, and that's totally okay. Some of them might want to do everything, and that's okay too. And the biggest thing about this is they have options. So it's not like a normal yoga class where you're told to do something. It's options, and really listening to your body and what your body is wanting and needing in that time. So my goal and my hope for the survivors that come through is from week 1 to week 8, they're just going to see such a big transformation, and I guess knowledge, and more, not really knowledge, understanding about, their trauma and their body and just things around that. So yeah, and you can contact me, Jess at empoweryolo.org, if you're interested, or you can call me 530-665-5320, or you could come into the Empower Yolo office and the client navigators can help you fill out a form.
Wonderful, thank you. Jen, can you tell us a little bit about some of the healthy coping strategies that you've seen survivors that you've worked with use?
Yeah, so some of the survivors that I have worked with, been able to, cope through their trauma was through counseling and support group, has mentioned before. What I thought was interesting, because one of my clients was actually saying it was for her to open up. She was being able to tell her story through law, to the law enforcement. And she said that was a lot easier for her to be able to deal with and cope with the trauma that she was dealing with. So I thought that was pretty interesting for her. And also to like another, there's other classes, like everybody differs, but through meditation and exercise and breathing techniques. One was another survivor that I worked with. She said that it helped her ground herself into her mindset. So I thought that was interesting as well. And there's numerous things that you can do just to kind of help a client, making sure that they have a good supportive system, and that you're there working through them. And so, when they're able to open up to you, then just be there to listen to them. And yeah, it's pretty much.
Great.
So.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, no problem.
Laura, I understand that you have a special friend named Aloha, and Aloha supports people through the criminal justice process. Can you tell us a little bit about Aloha?
Most definitely. And just, I did send you a picture of Aloha in case the viewers want to see who Aloha is. But Aloha is a 9.5-year-old multi-generational Australian Labradoodle. What that means is that for multiple generations, she has been bred to be able to get certain characteristics so that she could be an appropriate service dog. Aloha is used currently as a, there she is. Aloha is used as a emotional support dog for victims of violent crime. She has been in that role for 9 years. She went through a lot of training and a lot of practice to be able to do what she does. And she recognizes when somebody has anxiety. It's funny because whenever there's a meeting or something going on and she's with me, she always is able to identify the person with the most anxiety in the room and goes and stands next to them. So she will accompany victims to court when they have to testify. As you can imagine, going to court and talking about something so intimate is very intimidating. And like Amy and Sarah said earlier, everybody has different ways of healing. Well, us as human beings are very judgmental, and it's just in our nature. Aloha has no judgment. Aloha loves everybody. So she can be very healing to some people and has helped hundreds and hundreds of victims through the criminal justice process, just because, she doesn't ask questions. She's just there to love and to give people time to be able to be ready to proceed.
David, is it an easy process to allow Aloha to accompany victims in court, or is there something special that your office has to do to allow that to happen?
Usually we just ask for the judge's permission, either, verbally, or we file a motion for certain jury trials, but it's actually really simple. The judges are very accommodating.
Great. Are courtroom dogs common in California?
I don't know the answer to that. I guess that'd be something more for Laura.
Thank you, David. So they have become a lot more common in the last, I would say, 7 years. The Yolo County DA's office was actually one of the very first DA's offices in California to have a emotional support dog. And that was 16 years ago. There was our very first emotional support dog, Daisy, who was volunteered by a community member and was placed at the Multidisciplinary Center, where she would assist the little ones that were coming in to talk about very traumatizing situations for themselves. But we were one of the very first DA's offices in Yolo County to have that. And Aloha then came in 5 years after Daisy. But right now, yes, it is very common. Most DA's offices have emotional support dogs. And if they don't have one that works at the DA's office the way Aloha does, they have different programs that come in and bring emotional support dogs to assist victims.
Wow, it's wonderful. So one of the things this episode talks about is the California Victim Compensation Board, and they explain how mental health is the #1 compensated service for survivors of sexual assault and child abuse. And I know that all of the advocates in this room are able to help survivors apply for compensation. But Laura, can you tell us a little bit more about how your office can assist survivors with compensation claim applications?
Most definitely. So as you said, there used to be a time where just the county victim service programs were the ones that were submitting applications for the victim compensation program. But now all advocates and all agencies are able to submit, which is amazing. It's great. The victim compensation program is a program that exists through the state of California. All 58 counties have access to being able to apply for the victim compensation program. It's funded by fines and fees from the court. So it's not funded by taxpayers. It's funded by defendants once they're sentenced. So fines and fees are what cover this. It assists with such things as relocation, counseling, medical bills. It assists with funeral burial expenses, if those exist, with modifications of homes, with security systems for the homes, with modifications of vehicle if somebody would have lost a limb or something of the sort. It also assists with income loss. Many times, like for example, parents whose children have been sexually assaulted, those parents end up missing time to be able to be there for their child. And they're able to submit that time because it's not a vacation and it should not be treated as a vacation. They're able to submit that time and have the Victim Compensation Board assist with that. So we do submit the claims. We don't process them in Yolo County. We simply assist the victims in being able to fill out the forms, having them complete. We're able to put a packet together and send it to the state where they're processed by one of the joint power counties, which are selected in California.
Great, thank you. One of the exceptions to victims' compensation, so typically applicant would need a police report to be eligible to apply, but sexual assault and domestic violence survivors are not required to have a police report in order to receive services for mental health. So Amy, can you tell us what your department does when a survivor needs compensation, but they have not had a police report documenting that crime?
Yeah. We have training as mental health professionals to assess clients for trauma and be able to write a letter that states that we're seeing this person and that they have symptoms consistent with domestic violence or sexual assault. And that's generally accepted by Cal VCB. So it needs to be a mental health professional signing that document and signing off on that. It doesn't necessarily say that we have for a fact know that something happened. It just says that their symptoms are consistent with this kind of crime.
Okay, wonderful. So the advocates and the therapy department at Empower Yolo can work together to fill out those applications and get that mental health in lieu of form filled out so that we can request mental health services for survivors of those types of crimes. All right, Laura, can you tell us about the Crime Victims' Rights Week happening next week and what the Yolo County District Attorney's Office is doing to recognize that event?
Thank you, Selena. So the week of April 24th is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Throughout the nation, there's going to be different events and different things to recognize and to bring awareness about crime victims throughout the nation. The Yolo County District Attorney's Office will be celebrating our 16th annual Survivor Tribute. So what this is we like to highlight a few of the cases that we have worked with during the year, highlight the survivors' resilience, their strength, and their perseverance in getting through such a difficult situation. You know, one of the things that happens when somebody's a victim of a crime is their life is completely shattered. And finding a new normal is a process, and it's a process that can take forever. But we like to honor those survivors that have used that experience and turned it around to be able either to educate others, to be able to help others through what they've gone through, and also just simply to bring awareness to the community about these crime types that are happening in Yolo County. So we are going to have our virtual event. I invite all of you to join us. It's going to be virtual on Tuesday, the 26th. You can find the link to our event on yoloda.org. And we will be virtually presenting to 4 different survivors of crime. There's one survivor of fraud, elder abuse fraud. There's another survivor that will be honored, the family members of a murder case that happened quite a while back, and it was on warrant status for a number of years. There's 2 more survivors that will be honored who went through the RJP program, the Restorative Justice Program. And it was an attempted break-in into their home in the middle of the night. And they will talk about that experience for them. This year, every year we select a hero of the year. And this year's hero is going to be Empower Yolo, the staff services that they provide. So we're super excited to be presenting to Empower Yolo. We always work very closely with them. We couldn't do our job without them because of the whole thing where we have no confidentiality and they do. And we are able to provide the best services to victims by working with programs such as Empower Yolo or CARE or any other of the victim service organizations, community victim services organizations. And we want to also highlight that and show how wonderful these agencies are. We will also be presenting we like to do a gift to the community every year. So we will be presenting our gift to the community at that event as well.
Ooh, cliffhanger, stay tuned. Thank you, Laura. All right, so there's also one more important day coming up in honor of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and that's Denim Day. And Sarah, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about Denim Day.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. So Denim Day is an annual internationally recognized event that's intended to raise awareness and promote action to end sexual violence. This year, Denim Day falls on Wednesday, April 27th. So for as long as I've known about Denim Day, it's always on a Wednesday, but this year it's Wednesday, April 27th. A little bit of history around Denim Day and its origins. It started in 1992 after the Italian Supreme Court overturned a rape conviction of a 45-year-old driving instructor who had raped his 18-year-old student on her very first driving lesson. He drove her out to an abandoned road, took her out of the car, and raped her. He was convicted. He appealed, and as it went through the appeals process, the Italian Supreme Court argued that because the victim was wearing really tight jeans, they assumed that she would have had to have helped him take the jeans off, thereby turning it from a rape into consensual sex. The next day, the women in the Italian parliament showed up to work wearing jeans as a protest to this decision. And so then it has grown over the years, and now there are numerous Denim Day events held all over California, the United States, and internationally. For this year, if folks are wanting to get, actually, let me go back. So if folks want to get a little bit more information about Denim Day, the website that I will often share with folks is denimdayinfo.org. Has a nice summary of how Denim Day started and what the purpose of Denim Day is. For folks who are interested in participating in Denim Day this year or any year, some things that they can do is wear jeans on Denim Day. So for this year, it's Wednesday, the 27th, and talk about why. So both those things together. So wear jeans and talk about the why. Promote Denim Day on your social media accounts and talk about why. Learn more about rape myths in general and the realities of trauma responses, which may seem counterintuitive to others, but are really survival strategies for the victim. And then the last action step that I would provide for folks to consider is to donate money to organizations that do this work. So donate your money to Empower Yolo, or look up your local rape crisis center and donate some money.
And I didn't ask her to say that, but thank you. And actually, there's one more event, Sarah, if you could talk about the Take Back the Night event as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Take Back the Night is typically an event that's held most of the time in April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, although I've seen some communities hold their Take Back the Night event in October during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. For UC Davis, we often host an event. This will be our first in-person Take Back the Night event in a few years. This event is held in the evening. This year it will be at the Student Community Center. It starts at 7 p.m. There will be resources, tabling resources, and some self-care activities from 7 to 7:30. The event speakers and performers start at 7:30. Probably will go until about 8:30 when we'll wrap up the event. There's a mix of speakers and performers. So some folks performing music or songs, spoken word poetry, and survivors that will be sharing their experience. I will say I have always found our Take Back the Night on campus to be a really wonderful and supportive event. So I invite anybody who's interested to come out. That event is on Thursday, the 28th of April. Sorry, I had to double check my calendar. So Thursday, the 28th of April, at the UC Davis campus in the Student Community Center. There is more information on the UC Davis Care website, as well as our Instagram account, if folks are interested in that. Thank you for letting me plug that event.
Yes, no, thank you. They are wonderful events. I definitely encourage anybody interested to come. So thank you everybody for joining today. Next week will be our last listening club. We'll be discussing episodes 6 and 7, a guide to being an ally and a community problem. So join us to learn more about what we can all do to support survivors and what some local community members are doing to be a part of the solution. So thank you all. Hope to see you at some of the events next week. Take care.
Thank you.